Yes, I am because we are. Thank you very much, everyone that joined us today. And also feel free to share the link with your friends and family to also join us in today's meeting. Yes, we're going to start our meeting, our Saturday Pan-African History Call. And as usual, we always start off with a prayer. We are going to ask our brother, Isaac, to lead us in a prayer in his local language. Yes, Isaac, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, love Black people community. This is one Isaac from the capital of South Sudan, Juba. Let us pray together as a family. Tamadi sare sa menzo nyama muka karau gasi ama izi sare si sana mamuri apa ma uyako ama kaya uya kwa madi kwa dunya diga hata madi nyemba mata sa chido tamelera gasi ya deni ama lab Black people community de banya diga ini ama rani ado yani no te nyemba mata sa chido plan sama dia arega ikamani mori do madial Hello.
Yes, thank you very much for that wonderful prayer. We can continue with your report. You have 3 minutes. Yes, Isaac, can you hear us?
Please. Okay, yeah, I can get you now clearly.
Okay.
Once more, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, my fellow brothers and sisters across the globe. As I introduced myself before, my name is Wane Ezra Kurman from the capital of South Sudan, Juba. I'll be presenting on the current status of our country, South Sudan. Majorly, I'll be talking on current situation in terms of economy. Because Sudan, our northern region brothers from Sudan, that affected also our population in Juba and the whole of South Sudan. Starting with the current situation in South Sudan, we understand that currently, due to the crisis, our economy has really gone down. It's acquiring food items, non-food items from the market because like the dollar rate is now like $1 is equivalent to 130 SSP, which is too expensive. It used to be 75. It used to be like 0.75, but now it's too high, which is making it difficult. Mostly those ones who are working with international NGOs and national NGOs, including UNs, are the ones currently surviving because they are getting actually a good amount of money. Coming to the current crisis that is happening in our neighboring country, Sudan, what I would like to say is that we have a number of population that is trying to flee from the conflict that is happening in Sudan to South Sudan. The major entrance point is called Rang County. It's based in a place called in a region called Upper Nile. So when you look at their situation, I actually went up to there last week. I went up to there and also tried to interact with some few of the returnees from there because we had before many people flew from to Sudan when it was still one due to the independence, they will not gain. Some majority of the population, few of them refuse to decide, and some who are able, them also have the family. Then the elders came decide to look for. So currently, mostly only are the citizens of South Sudan. In average, every day, from what we collected, is that like almost 1,000 people coming to South Sudan through that entry point, a place called Rank County. And
yes, you have 30 seconds left.
okay, yeah. So when we look at their current situation, their situation, these people are suffering. Though there's the humanitarian organizations supporting them, still they are suffering. Also, as our South Sudan government also supporting them. Still, they are really in their need of help. So I'm also asking our blood brothers. At least we need to help one another. Our brothers who are also neighboring there. They're also supporting those community who are coming in terms of water, food items. Though the UN agencies are also giving them some items. So that's where I'm going to stop. I also expect SFS people community. We need to keep on promoting this movement. We need to also allow our brothers and sisters who are our friends, neighbors, to be able to safe places for us to move forward. Thank you. This is Isaac from South Sudan, Juba. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Isaac from South Sudan. Up next, we are going to have is our brother Samuka Kroma from Sierra Leone. Yes, Samuka, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself. Sorry, we can't hear you. You can unmute yourself. Yes, we can hear you now.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, Samka and Kuma. You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You have 3 minutes to present your report.
I'm sorry. I'm calling from Liberia. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm calling from Liberia. I'm Samka and Kuma. I'm Jordan Bujagan. Sister. I've been working on the narrating over the past 6 decades. I've been a wide range of developments, races, and in of development in Africa. The power immediately turned positive dangerous situation of terrorism, poverty, forced migration, and diseases have been experienced in the African countries. One thing is certain, the transformation that Africa has been undergoing in the recent decades has been remarkable. Africa has shaped its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity instead of African truth. In shaping the range of progress, but acknowledging progress does not oversolve the responsibility and continue working towards the African continent. As for Liberia today facing an economic stability based on press in Liberia is increasing. Things has getting hard, very hard in Liberia right now. Things prices are increasing. People are suffering. There are some people, special days, count of racism, water entering some people's houses, and there is no money to resolve or build a zero. So by recognizing Africa as an opportunity rather than a threat,
Yes,
the governments,
can you please raise your voice a little bit?
yeah, by recognizing Africa as an opportunity rather than a threat, the government, citizen organization on the continent around the world will be better positive to pose challenge and further build positive thinking in the mind of Africa leaders and Black people in the world to love each other, help one another, stop racism in the world. Because right now in Liberia, the racism has been based on
Yes,
the
you have 30 seconds left.
yes. As for Liberian, the racism has been based in the company based on how they treat the work in the black in the companies in Liberia right now is very bad. For the government have no solution to that right now. So this coming August, we'll be having an election. I will be happy to have a great leader and for others to join me in order to have a great leader so we can stop all those things. Where the country is in a critical condition right now. Things are raising high, prices are going high, people are suffering, and
Yes,
things have been very hard.
thank you very much, Samuka, for that wonderful report. That was our brother Samuka from Sierra Leone. Up next, we're going to have our brother uh, Joseph Mulesuku from South Sudan. Yes, Joseph, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself. Yes, I think our brother Joseph has a issue with
Hello, can you hear us? Can you
yeah,
hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, I was having a small issue.
Oh, okay. Yes, you have 3 minutes to present your report.
Thank you very much. Hello, family. I'm Resum Joseph from South Sudan. Wherever you are, all I greet you in the name of God Almighty. Although I'm an engineer by trade, I'm currently engaged in peace efforts among South Sudan refugees as a peace and conflict resolution coordinator with a non-profit. And today I would like to speak about the search for peace in South Sudan. As the title suggests, South Sudanese have been struggling for almost half a century trying to find peace through military and political struggles in that quest for peace. And that is why most of us now are called the war generation because none of us actually knows what peace really looks like. But this is perhaps true for most Africans on the continent and abroad also. And peace is supposed to mean for us, among many things, freedom from quarrels between individuals, freedom from mental, emotional, spiritual anxiety, freedom from external interference and disturbances, and most importantly, absence of war. Now, no society can be legitimately said to be the most perfect society. But generally, South Sudanese are very loving and generous people. We love community and work together in groups for the benefit of all. It's almost impossible for anyone to starve to death in any neighborhood in South Sudan where there is food. The spirit of sharing is also very high among the people. You cannot sleep on the streets when there is a house with a neighbor, and a child is strictly forbidden from begging of any form because it's believed that it brings shame to the family, to God, and to the ancestors. So everyone who can work must work to take care of those who cannot, and the land is considered to be king because life comes from it, and community is more important than it. This is the spirit of Ubuntu, I think. And we have found peace in this way of life that sustained us for many centuries, even millennia. But unfortunately, this is not actually the situation on the ground. Since independence, our people went to war with one another. The trust between the tribes is broken, being replaced by hatred. And South Sudanese today actually would easily trust the wisdom and words of an outsider more than that of his brother or sister from another tribe. We also have been educated to despise and hate our great cultures, and by extension, ourselves. And so we are losing our languages, our foods, our spirit of cooperation is dying and being replaced with this cannibalistic individualism of capitalists that is actually driving many of us to destitution and poverty. So our life-giving resources, for example, in South Sudan, are being privatized now for the preference of individual profit over lives. So the resulting influence has always created many homeless children in our growing city. As families now can have food, housing, healthcare, education, water. As you heard from my brother from South Sudan, Wani, this does not actually favor our desire for peace and prosperity for all our people in South Sudan. And even if we got our independence in 2011, it appears to me that we have not yet shaken off the chains of imperialism. Our wealth is flowing to sustain foreign lands as our country gradually disintegrates. This is our struggle. And our struggle today is that South Sudan should restore peace by reclaiming our identity, who we have always been, so that all our members in the society might experience prosperity. We have to unite. I am because we are. Ubuntu. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, thank you very much. That was our brother Mulesuku Joseph from South Sudan. Thank you for that wonderful report. Up next, we are going to have our brother Aloysius Jadin. Yes, Aloysius, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm hearing you. I hope you guys are hearing me.
Yes,
well.
we can hear you. And
okay, thank you.
There are people who raised their hands. They can write in the comment section their comments, and I'll get back to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for providing me this opportunity to give my report on ways through which we can explore to promote indigenous African languages to strengthening our cultural identity. Firstly, I would like to start with a brief narrative on my own self as a Liberian and the group of indigenous people that live within the space of Liberia. I come from two different indigenous backgrounds. My mother is a Bassa and my father is a Golaf person. And then what the thing, the unfortunate thing is that I've been raised as a coward. So I don't speak my native language, Gola, which of course is prevalent upon me as an individual to learn. And then we have focused so much on the English language. And then because of that, our institutions, our schools, our narratives, they are all in English. That's the problem. And in Liberia, we have 16 indigenous languages. And then we have the foreign language, which is English, as we use it as a national language. So normally when we are feeling informed, we say our native language is English, which of course it shouldn't be. And it's scary. So of the 16 indigenous languages, I hailed from both of them. And then what I do is that at least I understand the Bassa a little bit because I stay with my mom. And then when I speak some at least a little bit, but I can understand the Gola as well. Africa. If you look at the geographical location of Africa, it tells you that Africa is the second largest continent on Earth, and then it has a space or a square area of 11,642. Let me say 11,642,000 square miles. Let's say 30,152,882 square kilometers. The area, Africa. The major languages spoken in Africa are divided into 4 families categories. You look at the Niger Congo, the Nilo-Saharan, the Afro-Asiatic, and the quotient of these. Africa alone has over 1,500 to 2,000 languages spoken, and they are divided into these 4 distinct categories. And if you look at that, you notice that we have a lot of indigenous languages, and preserving them is something is an onus upon all of us. So we need to see how best we can take the narrative into our own hands and see how best we can promote our own African languages. Now, what is a local language? What is language in itself? For the sake of this discussion, I would say language is a form of communication that allows intercourse between multiple individuals. That is arbitrary in words individual, is generative also in word placement, and is constantly evolving. Like even the English language that we speak, the presentation we do, the French language that we speak, every time you notice that there is a new add-on. And then what is culture in itself? They say culture, on the other hand, is a set of general norms for a particular group of people cultivated through languages to create distinction and share values of sobriety. Now, what makes language to be so valuable or to be so important to cultural identity? What makes language to be important to cultural identity is that language is the nexus between cultural and a strong cultural identity and the acceptance of individual values and environment.
Yes, you have 30 seconds left.
Yeah, so what we can do is that the ways through which we can try to prevent our culture, let me say our indigenous languages, is one, by preserving them, promoting them, enhancing ways through which we can use our own technology, and then taking the narrative into our own hands. One recommendation I would like to make is that, you see, multilingualism is something that most countries are using. During the Industrial Revolution, the Euros and Americas, they decided to share their tradition, their cultural values through their languages. At the end of the day, they brought the form of education where we took to be formal education by using the English language. And they became, and because of that ideology, America became the most powerful nation in the world. For Africa to change the narrative, to control for security and whatever it is, we need to see how best we can preserve our own languages through these narratives and things, and hold the authority into our hand. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Aloysius, for that wonderful report. Up next, you're going to have our brother, Amazing Grace Atebeka. Yes, Amazing Grace, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself. Sorry, unmute yourself again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you have 3 minutes to present your report.
All right, thank you. Vone. As you have already heard, I'm Amazing Grace from Malawi. I'm presenting on the importance of Pan-Africanism. Just a few, an overview. Pan-Africanism this is a worldwide movement that aims to encourage and strengthen the bond of solidarity between among Africans all over the world. And to talk about who should be a Pan-African, or who is a Pan-African. A Pan-African is us, yeah. They love Black community and all the African culture, and also is a person who believe that solidarity among African continent settlers will fulfill the potential to independently provide Africa with a crucial development and an image globally. Pan-Africanism is comprised of people of modern day and also the African heroes. The PDF, I wanted to beam it, but I'm failing to do that today. I don't know. But we have, just to mention a few, the late Robert Mugabe and the late Dr. John Pombe Magufuli, Muammar Gaddafi, Yoweri Museveni. These are the Pan-Africanists and the fathers and founders of our organization. Pan-Africanism have got a mindset that has to be adopted and be followed across the world, as it aims to foster a sense of unity among the people of African continent all over the world. Or Pan-Africanism has an idea that people of African ascent or descent have a common interest and should be unified. Or is to safeguard and protect the lives of all Black people across the world from any form of Afrophobia or be it xenophobia, as we all see scenes that happens in South Africa. Pan-African mindset also attempted to create a sense of brotherhood and collaboration among all African people of African descent. The importance of all this, to have this mindset that I love Black people and integrating it with the Pan-Africanism ideology and the principle. In the today, we know that borrowing this idea, we can live in no fear in wherever country we are, whichever place we are across the world. We can live with a hope that if anything happens, a brother will come to give me a hand. And this really has created a sense of belonging, a sense of unity and hope among us. And the Pan-Africanism has got a history that is the origin of the African Union, the present African Union. And we know that African Union is hosted in Addis Ababa, while the Pan-Africanism Parliament has a seat in Midlands in Johannesburg. Finally, I just want to feel happy that I'm one of the family, the I Love Black People family, and to have you all here, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much, Yvonne. That is my presentation.
Yes, thank you very much, Amazing Grace. I am because we are. Yes, up next we're going to have our brother Shadrach Nuni from Cameroon. Yes, Shadrach, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself. Yes, Shadrach, can you hear us? Yes, Shadrach, can you hear us? Okay, I think they're having some network issues. We are going to continue with the Pan-African healthcare class with Nana Akua. Yes, if you would like to receive a shout out from her, you can turn on your video. Yes, Nana Akua, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. I'm in a different location. Same house, different location, but the reception is not as great here. So hopefully everything will be fine. But greetings, everyone. Welcome, Amos and Abraham and Joseph and Asafo, I'd say. I may have mispronounced that. But greetings, everyone. Glad to see you all here today. I'm going to see if hey, Chris, Atapika, hey, Isaacs. I missed anybody. All right, so we are going to see what I can pull up. Will it open up what I'm trying to? I don't know. It's too much. It's just showing you my. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, there was one other thing I was going to go back over from last week. Because there was a nice little flyer or handout about that. So last week, the last 2 weeks, we spoke about nutrients, our essential nutrients that we need. And we know that is proteins, carbohydrates, fats, water. I feel like I'm forgetting one. Vitamins and minerals, fats, carbohydrates, yes, water. So we spoke, I think, about each of those things, natural sources of each of our micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, along with water and good carbs and what fats we need in our systems. And the last thing in that section I wanted to talk was food colorings or food additives. And so if we're considering nutrition and we are attempting the best foods into our bodies, in addition to reading labels and making sure that we're having good carbohydrates and good fats and healthy proteins in the foods, we also have to consider other additives that we may find in our food. So I just wanted to say a quick word about food coloring. I don't know in other parts of the world, but here in the US, there are a lot of food colorings that are added to our foods, especially children's foods. A lot of drinks and things of that nature will have added colors, artificial colors. So I want to encourage you to read labels and to avoid foods that will have some sort of dye or food coloring in it. So it may say yellow number 5 or 6. It may say Blue Lake number 40, red 40. There are all these different, and it'll say the color and it'll have some number usually attached to it. These are artificial dyes or artificial food coloring. And a lot of these, all of these really have been linked to some sort of either cancer or some sort of disorder or some sort of brain malfunction these artificial colors will cause. And in certain parts of the world, certain food color dyes are banned. And so we really want to be just as careful about making sure the foods have nutrients in them, that they also are void and don't have these artificial food colors in them. Okay. So today we are moving into talking about herbs and other natural healing plants, homeopathics, essential oils, things of that nature that God created that will create a healing environment in the body. But from last week, we know that also herbs will naturally include or contain, I should say, various vitamins and minerals. So if you remember last week, if you joined us, we gave the herbal sources of our essential micronutrients. So knowing that alfalfa, for example, naturally contains most vitamin mineral we need in our bodies, or that catnip or red raspberry or horehound, or all of these different herbs naturally contain vitamins and minerals. I want to share just a different perspective about herbs this week. So we know that herbology or herbal medicine is the use of herbs to heal the body, to bring about balance, to correct an illness or heal the body of some type of dis-ease or health challenge, right? And so we know that these herbs will not only contain vitamins and minerals that the body needs, but also do certain types of work based on their healing properties in order to heal the body. So some herbs will have a certain impact. Some are what we call alterative herbs, where they cleanse the blood. or some will be antispasmodic, where they help relieve muscle pains or spasm pain in the muscles. Some are analgesic to help with pain. Others may be laxatives, where they will help evacuate the bowels or the colon. So there are many different properties, healing properties, that our herbs naturally contain, and that is how and why they are used to heal the body. So I wanted to go over a few. This handout is very old. I got probably 20 years ago from a local health food store. And I've always kind of kept handy because it gives sort of a really abbreviated version or explanation of what the different herbs do. Some information you'll get on herbs will give a really exhaustive listing or information profile on the herbs, whereas this is pretty kind of scaled down. It's really simple, gives you sort of the highlights of what this herb does, even though we know it may do many other things and could be explained in more detail. But for this purpose, I think this abbreviated version works very well. The other thing I like about this handout is that it also will give, in this area here, conditions that we commonly may encounter and what herbs are good for those conditions. So I usually just skip through and go through some of these herbs here, but I usually will use this handout to highlight some of my favorites. Some years ago, I created just to explain what herbal medicine is and highlight some of my favorites. So I want to, I think I'll still use this handout here. But as I previously stated, herbal medicine is defined as medicinal use of herb plants and trees to regain or maintain health. Herbs are used to cleanse, detoxify, rebuild, tone the body in order to bring it back into balance. Mother Nature should be appreciated not only for her beauty, but also for her valuable resource of wild foods and medicines. These wonderful cures from the earth are often neglected and underrated. One should always attempt to heal themselves naturally before even considering unnatural or artificial means. There are herbal cures for nearly every disease or illness known to man. And here I will list a few of the herbs that every household should contain. We should have herbs such as valerian and ginger on hand, just as we do aspirin and Alka-Seltzer. Better yet, we should have these herbs and natural supplements instead of these medicines. Should really be replaced altogether. So this writing will help us start making that transition. So if you're just becoming familiar with herbs and how to use them, this is a really good place to start. And so even more so than the handout that I just went through, where it lists several different ones, this might be a good place to start, just so you can kind of narrow down the list of where you might want to get or what you might want to get initially and then add to it. So let's get into it. So ginger, one of my favorites, all of these are my favorites. This is how they got on this list, but let's start with ginger. Ginger cleanses the colon, it reduces spasms and cramps, stimulates circulation. It's a strong, which means it kills, viruses, bacteria, parasite, fungal infections. It helps against sores, wounds, bowel disorders, circulatory problems, fever, hot flashes, indigestion, and on and on. Most people know ginger for the whole morning sickness, nausea thing, but it does a lot more. Pain, fever, nausea are probably the key words that I would say that ginger helps with. Usually you can take it in really any form, whichever you prefer. Ginger has a pleasant taste. A lot of drinks are flavored with ginger. So drinking it in tea or extract form is definitely going to be an option. However, if you don't for some reason like the taste of ginger, you can always use it in capsule form. Valerian is another one. This is not one that I would suggest using in tea form because it has a very strong taste and smell. So you will not love this one, I don't think. So usually in capsule form is what you're going to want to use valerian in. But valerian improves circulation. It acts as a sedative. It reduces mucus from colds. It's good for anxiety, fatigue, high blood pressure, insomnia, irritable bowel syndrome, menstrual cramps, muscle cramps, nervousness, pain, spasms. It's really good for pain and discomfort and anxiety. That is most often what it's going to be used for. Most people use it if they're in some sort of physical body pains, or if they are stressed or can't sleep, or they're experiencing some type of anxiety. Cayenne is a really powerful digestion, improving circulation. It helps stop bleeding. It's good for the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, the pain, so many of our organs, right? So cayenne is wonderful to have. It wards off colds, sinus infections, sore throats, things of that nature. Usually you're going to want to use this in capsule form. Of course, if you're familiar with different cleansing or detox drinks like that Master Cleanse, where it uses the lemons and the water and the maple syrup, which I play with old school, that actually add the actual powdered capsicum or cayenne or the extract. So it can be used, and of course you would just use smaller amounts so that you can tolerate the heat. So there are some formulas that do call for it in actual liquid form or the powdered form. But most people would usually mix this in a capsule formula either by itself or with another combination of herbs. The next one is garlic. Garlic, we know, has a very strong smell and taste. Most people use it for flavoring foods, but we know that medicinally, it helps to detox the body, protects against infection, enhances immune function, it lowers blood pressure, improves circulation. It's good for arteriosclerosis, arthritis, asthma, cancer, circulatory problems, cold, flu, heart disease, a number of conditions. But we also know that not everyone will want to smell like garlic, because it is one of those herbs that is very strong and can be very off-putting. So if you are using a lot of raw garlic, other people will smell it. So some people will choose to use this sparingly if you're using it fresh or raw, or some people will opt for odorless tablets, which will make it a little easier to tolerate for yourself and for others around you. But cooking with it in foods is always probably the best or easiest option. But if you are specifically using it for medicinal purposes, just adding it to your foods is not going to be enough. So you usually will need to do it in supplement form. And juicing is another option. Again, you will taste and smell it on you, but there are definitely many healing juice recipes that do call for adding the cloves of garlic into your freshly pressed juice, or pressing it into your juice. So if you're doing greens or cucumbers or celery or other things, adding garlic cloves into the juicer just as you would other foods. There are some recipes that call for that. So you can determine how you would use the garlic. Rosemary is the next one. Another one that most people use in the kitchen or for culinary purposes, but it has a lot of healing properties. So I do love listing this one as a healing herb, not just a seasoning for your food. Rosemary fights bacteria. It relaxes the stomach, stimulates circulation and digestion, acts as an astringent and decongestant. It's also good for headache. It's good for mental clarity as well. It's good for high and low blood pressure. It's good for circulatory problems, menstrual cramps. And you can take this in tea form or capsules. Again, adding it to your foods will always help with its abilities. And again, most people are using rosemary for headaches and mental clarity. Even people who use this in spiritual baths and in spiritual healing It helps with discernment and clarity and things of that nature. So you might drink it in tea, you might make it in a bath. So there are many options for rosemary. Another listing here, this is not technically an herb, but charcoal I have listed here. Most that are listed on this handout are herbs, but it's really sort of a nature's cure handout. So I included charcoal here. And charcoal is important because activated charcoal, which you'll usually find in either powder or capsules or tablets, this is essential for removing toxic substances from the colon and from the bloodstream. So it's good for food poisoning, gas, upset stomach, diarrhea. It really neutralizes the toxins in the body. So if you've eaten something that doesn't agree with you, if you're traveling and again, something that you've eaten or drank doesn't agree with you, charcoal helps to neutralize those toxins in the body and then help remove it from your system. Aloe vera is the next one. And we know that aloe vera can easily be taken in juice form or in gel form. We know that we can use it externally and internally. Most times we're using it topically for sunburn and cuts and burns and things of that nature. But internally, we know that it soothes the entire gastrointestinal system. So it's good for stomach irritation. It aids in healing the stomach, has mild laxative properties, and it's good for AIDS and HIV, for skin and digestive disorders. And again, topically, we know it's good for wounds and burns. It helps stimulate cell regeneration. That's why it's good for that. That's why we use it topically. And it has astringent and emollient and antifungal and antibacterial and antiviral properties. So very mild, unassuming plant, but very healing just the same. The caution I usually give with aloe is that you're not consuming these aloe drinks. A lot of the Asian markets and things of that nature have these aloe vera drinks. And these do not usually consume any aloe vera juice, or if so, very little. And they have added sugars and sweeteners to them. And that's not really the healing parts that you really are trying to ingest with the aloe drinks. So you want 100% aloe vera juice. The next one here on this list is elder or elderberry. Elder builds the blood, it cleanses the system, it eases constipation, it enhances the immune system, immune function. So it helps the body fight all infections, inspiration, so it can therefore help cool the body down, and it's good for the. Usually people are making elder in a syrup. Form again. After dinner tea, so an hour or at least 30 minutes after your meal. This is great to include as a warm tea to help with digestion, because it's going to help speed up the digestion process. It's useful for chills, diarrhea, headache, heart trouble, indigestion, nausea, poor appetite, spasms. Usually people are using peppermint in tea form. If you're using it in other ways, you might use the essential oil in a diffuser and that area. Internally, usually we're consuming peppermint in tea form. Echinacea and golden seal are listed together, even though these are two very different, well, similar but different herbs, right? So in a combination formula, they complement each other very well. So you'll a lot of times find the two together. But just talking about them separately for a minute, echinacea has anti-inflammatory and antiviral properties. So it's good for the immune system and the lymphatic system. So people will use it for colic, colds, flu, and other infectious illnesses. And also it's good for snake bites, or really any kind of bite. So any kind of, if you get mosquito bites, and Lord forbid you don't get a snake bite, but if you get any sort of insect or animal bite, echinacea is good for, because it helps to boost your immune response to fighting off any toxins that come into the body. Golden seal, this acts as an antibiotic. It cleanses the body, increases the effectiveness of insulin. It strengthens the immune system, promotes the functioning capacity of the colon, liver, pancreas, spleen, and the lymphatic system and the respiratory systems. It cleanses the mucous membranes, counters infections, improves digestion, regulates menses, and a lot of other things. It reduces blood pressure, helps to stimulate the central nervous system. So it's good for a lot of conditions. Golden seal has been around for a very long time. It is a costly, kind of pricey herb because it's not plentiful. And so usually when they wildcraft it, they can only get it in certain amounts because the concern is that it will run out and it's not plentiful. If you ever come across a golden seal plant, this would be something good to grow on your own and to keep on hand, and also to cut down on the expense of having to purchase it. The root is what's best in this part of the plant. However, if you can only afford, say, the leaves or stems, then that can also be useful. But the most useful part of both of these, echinacea and golden seal, is going to be the root. Lavender. Lavender is an herb that most people love the aroma or the scent of. However, internally, it has a lot of healing properties as well. So whether you're using it internally or whether you're using it topically or as the aroma of the plant, it helps to relieve stress and depression. It's good for the skin. It helps with burns and other skin problems, psoriasis, things of that nature. Also good for headaches. You'll use this in a number of forms. So if it's in a salve or an ointment or a cream topically, or using it in baths or diffuser, the essential oil, or drinking the lavender as a tea. These are all good options for you. Skullcap, this is a nervine or sedative herb as well. So this is good for sleep. It improves circulation, stimulates the heart muscle. It's good for anxiety. Anything dealing with nervous system unrest. So if you are having pain or spasms or stress, if you're having withdrawal symptoms from different drugs that you may have used, if you're having headaches, if you're hyperactive, skullcap is a really nice, pleasant tasting sedative herb that can help with those things. Tea form, extract form, capsule form, these are all good options for skullcap. Nettle, one of my top ones, but again, all of these are my favorites. But nettle, I really love nettle because it has such a high mineral content. So a lot of times if we're low in energy or if our adrenal glands are kind of burnt out because we don't get enough sleep or we're highly stressed, nettle is a really, really good herb to include into your diet. But it's a diuretic, it's an expectorant, a pain reliever. It's one of those tonic herbs, and that's because of the rich nutrient value or nutrient content. This is definitely one of those herbs I would consider a super herb. Later on, we'll talk about superfoods and what foods are good because they have such high vitamin and mineral content. Nettle would be on the list on the herb side. It's good for anemia, arthritis, hay fever, allergies, sinus problems, kidney issues, goiter, thyroid issues, inflammatory conditions, excess mucus in the lungs and the bronchial passages. So this is really good. Most people use this who have allergies and hay fever, or they are mineral deficient. Tea form or capsule form for nettle. Crane's bill is the last on this list. This is an astringent herb. It impacts the stomach, the intestines, the liver, the heart. It's good for diarrhea, colitis, dysentery, anything associated with Crane's bill is good for. So if there are bleeding ulcers, if there are uterine fibroids, anything that there is a lot of bleeding, Crane's bill is going to be really good for stopping either internal or external bleeding. It promotes healing of burns and torn flesh. You can use this in tea form, tincture form. If it is used for some sort of uterine fibroids, then it can be used as a vaginal douche internally, or a vaginal bolus could be made with the crane's bill herb to help with vaginal discharge, or either rectally for hemorrhoids. People who have bleeding hemorrhoids and other sensitivity around the rectum, crane's bill is going to be excellent for. So any sort of bleeding disorders, which is why I included this on the list. And the last thing I'll say about herbs in this regard is, if you can grow herbs, I highly recommend it, whether out in a yard, whether on a balcony, in your windowsill, inside your home under a plant light, but in our need to sustain our food and be able to control our food supply, this is one of the things I often talk about. And even though we use herbs for seasoning and as part of our foods, even if we separated out the foods and the herbs, we're considering this as our medicine. So the ability to grow and maintain your own medicine, this is very powerful and very healing and helpful for our individual families and the community overall. This handout talks about herbal first aid. So some of the herbs that we just talked about are here, but some are not. So if you had a cut or a scrape or a minor burn, calendula is excellent for that. If you need to kind of calm yourself down, we mentioned a couple of nervine or sedative herbs previously, but chamomile is another that can be added to that toolbox. Fennel seeds. Fennel is great for indigestion, gas, bloating, also increases milk production in nursing mothers. Ginger is another one, and again, we've talked about that. Lavender. Lemon balm is one we've not mentioned. This is good for irritability, restlessness, indigestion, sleep. Marshmallow root, this is great for mouth and throat soreness, or mouth sores or sore throat, heartburn, cough, and indigestion. Oatmeal, we know if there is contact with, say, poison ivy or poison oak or some sort of plant that causes skin irritation, oatmeal is good for itchy rashes. We know that it's good for stress, anxiety, and helps with sleep. Peppermint we've mentioned. Red raspberry leaf, this is a good uterine tonic. It's good for pregnancy nausea, and just for women that are still in their childbirthing years, this is a good tonic herb to use on a regular basis as you continue to prepare your reproductive system for pregnancy and childbirth. And it's also good for diarrhea. And nettle we talked about. Now, I mentioned it only saying nettle, but stinging nettle or nettle, they're the same thing. So again, it's iron rich, but also other minerals, also high in calcium and some other minerals. But again, that's good for seasonal allergies and water retention. Again, we know that we cook and season with herbs, but we know that all of these culinary herbs will also have other healing benefits. So I'll mention just some that we haven't talked about already. So oregano is good for soothing the stomach muscles. Fenugreek is good for flushing harmful toxins. Clove is a strong antimicrobial, especially fungal and parasitic, but it also has antiviral and antibacterial properties as well. Sage is a good antiseptic and antibiotic. Dill is great for heartburn, colic, and gas. Cinnamon is one of my favorites. I love the smell. Spiritually, it's used in a lot of baths and incense and things, but we also know that it lowers the blood pressure. Black pepper, it's good for relieving indigestion. Basil is great for relieving gas and soothing upset stomachs. Turmeric has many properties. They've only listed anti-cancer here, but we know it's good for the immune system. It's good for the blood, it's good for the liver and the skin, it's an anti-inflammatory. So there's so many things about turmeric that we could say. And then thyme is good for the entire respiratory system. So if you are prone to bronchitis or asthma or some sort of respiratory issues, thyme is good for. Herbs that lower the blood sugar. This is important for a lot of our people. So we know that a lot of us have blood sugar imbalance on one end or the other. So these are some herbs that are really helpful for lowering blood sugar. Cinnamon, cloves, rosemary, oregano, sage, curry leaves, garlic, ginger, turmeric, cayenne, and marjoram. And just as I said, I forgot I had put this handout here, but yes, turmeric does a lot of wonderful things. I didn't mention detoxification, mood balance. I think that's important. Helping with cognitive functioning, youthful, radiant skin. And I did mention skin and liver, and it's good for supporting natural weight loss and cardiovascular function. So turmeric, definitely one of those that I would also put in the superfoods category. I did not even think I put these in this. Well, let's talk about African herbs. So we know that a lot of us are here on the continent, there on the continent. I'm one with you. I'm going to act like I'm there. I'm going to be there soon. Okay, so yeah, I put this, I guess I did put this here intentionally. So information that that's easy to find, that's written out and explained, even though we know that your local herbs person will have an array of local herbs that are native to whatever area you're in. But the ones that are featured here are from West and from South. And I know that there are many people that are other places, and East is one, but I pulled these out because it was sort of easy to find and just sort of a handout already about it. But we've talked about some of these already. We didn't talk about neem. Most people hopefully now are very familiar with neem. So we know that neem, not a very pleasant smell or taste, but we know that neem is very useful for warding off mosquitoes. And we know that in tea form and even as a bath, it is used for a lot of the tropical fevers, the yellow fever and the malaria and those types of things. So, and then even for skin conditions, hair, we know that it has antifungal properties and it's great for certain ailments that affect the skin. It has antibacterial properties as well. So neem is something that may very well grow outside of your compound or your home or what have you. We know it's reportedly originally from India, but due to colonizers coming in, it came in through East, and now it's definitely prevalent in West Africa and other parts of the continent. We know, I'm not familiar at all with the Kinkaliba tree at all. This is one that originates in Mali, Senegal, the Gambia, and Burkina Faso, but it's a strong tonic that helps with longevity, vitality, and overall wellness, helps improve digestion and elimination. Baobab oil, most people have seemed to use this for like skin, anti-aging of the skin, fine lines, like a natural beauty treatment that they'll add to cocoa butters or shea butters and things like that. I really wonder though if there are other uses for it, but the information that I could easily find mainly talks about it in terms of its skin healing properties. Lemongrass, we do get here and use a lot here. Here we mainly call it citronella, but we know that this is also good for warding off mosquitoes, but it's also used for vitality and longevity. Some people just use it as a cologne or perfume. They like the fragrance of lemongrass. We know that it's used in soaps and curries and other food dishes, but this is also native to West Africa. These plants here are grouped in the whole South African bunch, and we know that this could constitute several different countries, but the highlighted ones here in this handout are buchu, Buchu, I have personally used or recommended a lot over the years because of its, and I think it's out of order, because of its impact on the kidneys and the bladder. Yeah, and so it's known as an anti-inflammatory, an antiseptic. It's good for lowering the blood pressure, for urinary tract infections. Devil's Claw is another one of my favorites. This is great for pain. Most people will use this for pain here, but it also is good for diabetes, headaches, menstrual problems, things of that nature. African potato, I think, is a star also. It's been used a lot for boosting the immune system, treating chronic respiratory tract infections, bronchitis, sore throats, but also for your heavy hitters, AIDS, HIV, cancer, diabetes, things of that nature. So time, but we'll focus a little bit on herbs from other parts of the world as well. This gives you a good place to start in terms of herbs that we can use to heal the body and that we can add to our natural medicine chest. So I will pick up with this next week, and thank you for joining. And as always, I bid you good health and peace.
Yes, thank you very much, Nana Akua. Thank you for that wonderful lecture. I shared your email in the comment section. If there is anyone who would like to receive the handouts from you, they can email you. Yes, thank you. Have a wonderful weekend too. Yes, we are going to continue with the Pan-African history class with Dr. Tyrone Wright. Yes, Dr.
Yes,
Wright.
good morning, everyone, or afternoon and evening, wherever you are. Okay, so you see me in a second. So this week you read, well, for those of you who joined late, because I know we had some changes, right? So, and I'll be submitting a new syllabus that is going to be 16 weeks instead of the 8 weeks that we originally decided on. So you'll see that go up by Monday to give you a more abbreviated version. Hello, you'll see me in 2 seconds. So what I did was, so for every week, it'll be one item on the syllabus as opposed to multiple. So like last week, you all had the 2 items that I gave you. Well, this week, we're just going to deal with one of the items, which is the readings on the chapter called Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanist, which is actually, and you guys will see me in a second, I'm sorry. I had to sign in. I had a little technical glitch today, and I had to redo my Zoom sign in, and it literally was asking me for things that I did not have. Okay, so pardon me for the moment, but you will see me in less than a minute. Okay. That being said, you were to read Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanist, which recounts the history of Pan-Africanism and gives you some of the individual proponents of Pan-Africanism that you may not have heard of before. So that is the purpose of this reading this week. And I'm going to share it and go over some of the actual text so that you all can, those of you who may not even be fully enrolled, you can see what we are in fact talking about. I know you guys like visuals, so let me get on this camera. Let me make sure I have enough time. Okay. 11:15. Okay. So, all right, the sun is sort of shining, which is a good thing. Okay. So, so this week the reading is that chapter, and I'm going to open it up. Actually, I'll share my screen and we'll go through it. But first and foremost, what you should get from the chapter in the context of this course was a working definition of Pan-Africanism. Good morning, good morning. A working definition of Pan-Africanism. How that working definition came about, okay? You know, the history of that, right? The first Pan-African conference organized by people such as Henry Sylvester Williams, who was the secretary of the Pan-African Association, along with others, but he would contact people like Booker T. Washington and ask him to promote this first Pan-African conference that took place in 1900. So very important there, right? So the history of how Pan-Africanism comes into being, right? And if you read the chapter, you know that I talked about, yes, I wrote that chapter. You'll know that I talked about the coining of the phrase Pan-Africanism, okay, by Henry Sylvester Williams. A phrase, a term, but not a concept that didn't exist before. The concept in and of itself absolutely existed before, okay? This idea of coming together to protect ourselves is not a new concept. It did not originate or emerge or have its, did not originate in 1900, okay? And I go back and tell you, you know, even though the word had not been spoken, you know, even going back to, you know, David Walker's appeal or others prior to that, this concept of us coming together in order to eradicate oppression and exploitation existed. The Haitian Revolution, 1804, is evidence of that, right? Because ethnically, the African people that would find themselves on the island of Hispaniola, what we call Haiti, were just as diverse as we all are right here, right now, right? In different places, speaking different languages, having cultural diversity. The only thing they had in common is that they had all suffered the catastrophe of enslavement, and not by choice, right? Those of us born in the Western Hemisphere did not choose this at all. This is evidence of someone else imposing their will on our ancestors, right? So the concept always existed out of necessity, but the term would emerge with Henry Sylvester Williams. And he would essentially organize through the African Association, the first Pan-African Conference. So that's what you should have gotten from this chapter, that major point. And then you also, so you got the literal history, you got the term, you got the definition. If you got to the end of the chapter, you got the definition as it would manifest, the definition of Pan-Africanism as it would manifest in many individual proponents' own unique way, with one unified concept, which is that doing what you do for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation, right? So Du Bois would use an organizational path. He would continue the work of the first Pan-African Conference by initiating the Pan-African Congresses, right? Garvey would actually build on something that comes out of Tuskegee in terms of independence through industry, okay? And I talked a little bit about individual proponents, the major individual proponents, Du Bois, Garvey, right? And their connection to Booker T. Washington. Washington, once again, would, his approach to Pan-Africanism, and I know that's revolutionary. For those of you who don't know about my book, Booker T. Washington in Africa, it talks all about, you know, why I would even put Washington in this conversation. But that being said, his approach would be using independence through industry, right? Sustainability as the method, the path to eradicating oppression and exploitation. And then I speak into the future, you know, because I'm residing in the past there, revisiting that period. Then I speak into the future about the kind of Pan-Africanism Nkrumah would assert, okay? The unified Africa, right, under scientific socialism, okay? And none of them were the same. They all had their own unique expressions with this core understanding that what we do is for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation. That is definitively what makes something Pan-Africanist or not, right? Just us coming together is not enough. When we come together for the precise purpose of strategizing around eliminating our oppression and exploitation, that is definitively Pan-Africanist, okay? There was something else I was going to say. So moving right along, I begin to give you sort of a roll call of all the Pan-Africanists that would come before this moment of 1900. And it's important. It's sort of like, you know, it's sort of like what we do when we call our ancestors, or when we sort of venerate our ancestors, we speak their names essentially. So that's what I was doing there. I was speaking their names that probably had not been called in many, 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 many years. So I'm recalling all the names of the people who were in this tradition of eradicating oppression and exploitation, right? That was the purpose, because few people know all of those individual proponents who contributed to this collective concept called Pan-Africanism that comes out of our necessity, right? So I'm going to share that part. I believe it's page 16. It's not, the page number is numbered 16 in the reading, and I'm going to share it in here so we can see it together. So that is the purpose of that particular piece of this reading, right? To familiarize you with all the people that contributed. This way, we don't get this attitude or this idea that it's only this group or that group or this person or that person. No. Pan-Africanism really as a concept, as an ideology, really is something that many, many, many African people contributed to, okay? And we contributed to it out of necessity. And that's important, because what it says is that there was a collective consciousness amongst us. And we're sort of trying to get back on that path of collective consciousness. There's certain things we don't need to discuss. We all understand, right? Like, you know, like we don't want to be murdered, right? For being Black, right? We want our lives to be valued everywhere we are. We don't just want to be free in America. We don't just want to be free in South Africa. We don't just want to be free in Europe. We want freedom, and we want our humanity to be protected everywhere we go on this earth. That's a consensus, right? And so now that's not always been a consensus, but we're moving back towards that consensus. And so this historically shows you, because they're all coming from very different places, but they have this common issue. And this is why later on in the course, when we get further down the line and we start talking about ethnic differences and, you know, we get on the continent, national differences and all of that kind of stuff. This is why we have to put primacy on our present condition, because our present condition decreases our life chances, right? Our present condition decreases our life chance. It kills us, right? This is the short version. That being said, in one way or another, that being said, it has to take primacy over everything else, right? You can't have, you know, you can't have cultural engagement if you don't have life, right? You can't venerate your ethnicity if you don't have life. Right? So what do you want to do? You want to give primacy to preserving your life, and there is a common thread in respect to our very lives, right? I was having a conversation just recently with someone, and the person was flip-flopping back and forth on the issue. And then I said to the person, do you really understand what racism is? And, you know, oh yeah, I do. But he was talking very recklessly about always being on the march and always beating the drum on this issue. And I said, well, do you really understand what racism means? Racism means that you and I, for whatever reasons, in some way, will die prematurely. That's what it means. I mean, that's rough, right? But that's what it means. Okay, it will decrease all your life chances, either overtly and violently or in an insidious way that is through the indifference for your Black life, right? So you could go into the best hospital, the prettiest hospital, have the best medical insurance, but the people who are there giving care to you have a deadly indifference towards your life, right? That study out of Florida about the babies. What have the babies done? They're only 2 and 3 days old, right? But just by having a white doctor, it decreased their life chances in the neonatal ward. Okay, haven't done a thing in the world but breathe, right? But their life chances already decreased, just days old, because of racism and the deadly potency of it. And then they did the reverse study. Having a Black doctor restored the life chances of babies in the neonatal ward. Exactly, Serena Williams. I brought her up in the conversation with this person because the person started talking about money and resources and all of that. And that's the thing about racism. You can have money, you can have resources, you can have education. It does not insulate you from that. Absolutely not. On site, right? We already know, especially those of us in America, you can get it on site sometimes. They don't have to know who you are, right? And you could be disassociated from systemic racism and its deadly nature, right? Amadou Diallo coming from Guinea to New York, just doing his thing, supposedly coming for the purpose of education. He didn't know about this system like that. He's in the vestibule of his home. The cops roll up on him, tell him put his hands up. He tries to identify himself with his wallet, and what? He got 41 shots. right? On site, don't know his name, don't know anything about him, right? Didn't know anything about him, but he fell into this category of people who are a designated population and suffer under systemic racism. And I will add the pathology of systemic racism, right? Because we all know here through what we've already covered in this course, race isn't even real. It's a social construct that a certain small group of people have created and imposed on the rest of the world, right? So, so this is why, in spite of our diversity, we have to give primacy to this common conflict, this common issue, this common system that decreases our life chances, because it's indiscriminate in terms of targeting Black people, and it is systemic in the sense that you can't point your finger at any one individual most of the time. It is a machine, right? So we got to create our own machine, which is a human safety net, right? So that is what we are doing here. So let me get to the reading. Hold on one second. I'm going to just share a moment. The readings, you're not going to see me. Let me cue it. I'm going to go to where it is in Telegram and share. So those of you who are watching can see where it's at if you haven't already accessed it. Okay, so you should see my Telegram right there, right? Now, Yvonne, could you speak to me really quick about this? I don't see 25 anymore. Did you change the course 24 to 25 did you eliminate 25?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so this is just one and the same, basically, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you guys see where it is in Telegram. I gave you a little note, right? So the readings this week are in support of the 11-minute film lecture posted where Kwame Ture shares the history of Pan-Africanism. This chapter, that's a typo. This chapter's reading should deepen your knowledge of individual proponents of Pan-Africanism and how the concept emerged. So please forgive me for the typos, because let me tell you something. I'm like almost blind without my glasses, and I'm pretty sure I wrote that without my glasses. Okay, so let me put my glasses on. And this is the chapter. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll open up the quote that's in the beginning of the chapter, only for the purpose of giving you an overview of this chapter. And then I'm just going to quickly go to the area I want us to focus on, where we do the roll call for all of the ancestors that were involved in Pan-Africanism, the constituting Pan-Africanism. So there is, however, a tie which few white men can understand, which binds the American Negro to the African Negro, which unites the Black man of Brazil and the Black man of Liberia, which is constantly drawing into closer relations all the scattered African peoples, whether they are in the old world or the new. I have rarely met in America anyone of my race who did not, in one way or another, show a deep interest in everything connected with Africa. The millions of Negroes in America are almost as much interested, for example, in the future of Liberia and Abyssinia as they are in their own country. There is always a peculiar and scarcely definable bond that binds one Black man to another Black man, whether in Africa, Jamaica, Haiti, or the United States. And that's Booker T. Washington. Surprisingly, those of you who are in the United States are probably really surprised that that comes from Washington. I'll show you the citation really quick. It comes from right here, Washington's own book, Booker T. Washington, The Story of the Negro, The Rise of the Race from Slavery, published in 1909, okay? So that is Washington talking about the connection between African people everywhere we are, from the United States to the continent of Africa, from West Africa to East Africa, right? Liberia and Abyssinia, right? And then even South America. So now, don't get me wrong. I don't want you guys, when I say even South America, there are many Black people there, most who do not identify as African. Gotcha. They'll catch up eventually. My point is that someone who is a Pan-Africanist recognizes that, and recognizes that in spite of the people's consciousness, their condition is the same. Right? So you don't have to push them or pull them into what we're doing, but you know that their condition is pretty much the same everywhere we are. And that means that in spite of material reality, right? Like somebody put up here, Serena Williams, absolutely. Her material reality may not be the same as most of us. Okay. However, her position, her condition that she suffers under in this society definitely is, when she's got to beg people to give her medical attention post labor and birth. And she knows that she is having a medical crisis. They didn't care about how much money she had. They didn't care about who she was. They might now, because she's telling her story, right? Like, damn. But in that moment, she was just any old Black woman who they did not care enough about to give her the medical attention she needed while she was in a medical facility, right? So anyway, he's saying that we are in a coming closer together. It's sort of like this concept that Kwame Ture said. He said, blood is thicker than water, and everywhere we are coming closer together, right? So in other words, even though we are across oceans from each other, African people, we're blood. And it's thicker than water that separates us. And so everywhere we are coming together. We are coming to the common truth of things, that we are kin and we are in a common condition, most of all. So this is the part that I wanted to highlight for you all, just all of the contributors to this budding concept called Pan-Africanism. And it's not just about this moment in 1900, but it's about going all the way back. So you're fortified in understanding that you are in a tradition. You're not out here on your own. You're not the only one thinking this. You're not the only one doing this. You are not the first, and you will not be the last, right? But we're working towards the last, because we're hoping that what we do eradicates racism in a way where we don't have to revisit any of that, right? So prior to the first Pan-African Conference, 19th and early 20th century Pan-Africanism in the US was espoused and practiced by individuals like Bishop Henry McNeill Turner, Martin Delany, Edward Blyron, Henry Highland Garnett, and Alexander Crummell. But as early as 1829, David Walker's appeal reflected on the history of African civilization and made a connection between those in Africa and Africans scattered abroad. His appeal not only aimed to challenge the institution of slavery, but to educate the masses on African history and culture. Pan-Africanists among the African population in the Caribbean included the initiator of the first Pan-African Conference, Henry Sylvester Williams of Trinidad, Marcus Garvey's mentor, J. Robert Love, and Dr. J. Albert Thorne from Barbados. But decades prior to their emergence, the Haitian Revolution occurred and bolstered Pan-African consciousness in the diaspora as well. Haiti would produce Benito Sylvain, Antenor Furman, both whom met Booker T. Washington in 1897 and attended the first Pan-African Conference in 1900. Out of Haiti came a wing of Pan-Africanists who created literary discourse on diasporic philosophies on Africa. The African population in Haiti produced Jean Prince Mars and Louise Joseph, who repeatedly explained that Haiti was the embodiment of the irresistible force of a united Africa. Pan-Africanism had a dialectical characteristic to it, which allowed historic events like the Haitian Revolution to produce a response and rise in consciousness amongst African people internationally. Similarly, in 1896, the Ethiopian victory over Italian imperialist forces in the Battle of Ottawa also bolstered the connection between diasporic Africans and those on the continent. The social climate and consciousness of the African diaspora in the Western Hemisphere and throughout the world produced two of the most prolific Pan-Africanists, W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey. Each of these men had important relationships and exchanges with Booker T. Washington. Marcus Garvey's relationship with Washington would open the door both literally and figuratively to the first mass organization of the African world through the Universal Negro Improvement Association. However, Washington's relationship with Du Bois would be inconsequential to the progress of Pan-Africanism. The relationship between Washington, the apparent accommodationist, and Du Bois, the Pan-Africanist scholar activist, has shaped African American social and political history in the US for at least a century. Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Marcus Garvey will all function differently. Remember what I was saying? Function differently, but with the common purpose. As Pan-Africanists, the methods they employed vary, but like previous Pan-Africanists, they all had one singular objective beyond unity, which was to advance the plight of African people in the face of oppression. Okay, so important point that I hope you all got. And then I start getting into the literal, interactions and all of that. Let me just go back here because I saw where I say something about Malcolm X and the philosophical line. Okay. So I'll just give this is a tidbit. In terms of philosophical lines, in this tradition of Pan-Africanism and this concept of organizing for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation, there is a philosophical line that, I think just for the purpose of knowledge, you should know in taking this course. So if you got up to page 29, there's a point where I share that there is a philosophical connection between Booker T. Washington and Marcus Garvey, which eventually influenced Malcolm X, for example, who was the product of a strict Garveyite household and later joined the Nation of Islam. Embracing the Nation of Islam was not a leap for Malcolm X and his siblings, who were also members of the Nation of Islam. In many ways, Malcolm returned to the values and principles of his parents. Both organizations believed in race pride, self-help, and economic and empowerment. The UNIA, which his parents were dedicated members of, had an unprecedented impact on African communities around the world through mass organization. Garvey's goals included unification, establishment of an economic base for African people, and a free and liberated Africa for Africans. But these objectives never came to fruition. However, what we did do was unparalleled. Never before, what he did do was unparalleled. Never before or since has a single person or organization appealed to the consciousness of African people throughout the world at the same time, like the UNIA led by Marcus Garvey. Okay, so just to give you a little tidbit so that you could see how this tradition and this concept of Pan-Africanism, if you will, has moved through many different proponents expressed in various ways. But one of the points I was about to make and sort of lost my train of thought before was that when we think about eradicating oppression and exploitation, you know, I want to come back on camera while I'm saying this to you, but I'm still sharing the screen. But anyway, when we think about the concept of eradicating oppression and exploitation, we have to understand that we are attacked in every area of life, which is why I made the statement that systemic racism does not attack us in one way or another, like it's indiscriminate. It attacks us in every area of life. Infinitely. That being said, we would be silly to think that there was just one approach to destroying such system. Okay, so let me give you an example. If racism was only experienced in the area of education, we would have won that battle already. If racism was only experienced in the area of housing, we would have won this already, because we would have come up with strategies to deal with that. If we only experience racism in the area of healthcare, we might still be fighting, but we'll be on our way, very close to coming up with a strategy to fight that. But that's not the case. It permeates every area of life. Okay? Even things we can see and things that are unseen. So it is necessary that we attack it in every context, in every area of life, that we counter it. Right? So this is one of the reasons why I think what I Love Black People has done with the Global Green Book is important, because it gives you resources in every area of life. But I believe this year was the particular focus on healthcare. And that's great in light of what has happened in the world, right? With COVID. COVID revealed systemic inequalities already in existence, right? So when you have a people who are disproportionately oppressed and exploited by a system that functions worldwide, when you have something like a pandemic, they are going to suffer disproportionately. Unless there is something that protects them biologically and or something that we've created to insulate ourselves to do that, right? So either something naturally or something created that protects us. Otherwise, we will suffer disproportionately because we are already, I hate to use this word. Well, I mean, I already came up with another word as soon as I thought of it, as soon as I said that. We are already compromised as a result of this collective system called white supremacy and culture, right? So, you know, but let me, this is something I don't do. I won't read the whole thing, but I will read most of the conclusion for those of you who haven't gotten to it, and just sort of break some things down in here. So Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanists established the origin of Washington's Pan-Africanist philosophy, which was rooted in his connection with the culture that produced his mother, who in his eyes represented the best of African people. It also established Washington's role in the early history of Pan-Africanism and his relationship with two important Pan-Africanists of his time. A literal definition of Washington's Pan-Africanist philosophy would be the unification of African people for the express purpose of eliminating oppression and promoting independence through industry, which would lead to liberation, both economic and otherwise. Washington's expression of Pan-Africanism was primarily concerned with action, okay, and practice rather than theory, rhetoric, or inspiration. So this is also why you wouldn't really know so much about Washington's role as a Pan-Africanist, because he was not involved in the rhetoric of the ideology. He was not involved in the inspirational aspects of the ideology. He was really bare bones in the sense that he was action oriented, right? So his role was not evidenced by ringing declaration, but by providing the building blocks for self-sufficiency, sustainability, nation management, and building a demonstrated on and building as demonstrated on a micro level at Tuskegee. Washington's role in early Pan-Africanism has been buried in history and for the most part played out in the shadows of his life. However, Washington always desired to know and understand Africa and its people, and this desire to connect with both was rooted in his childhood, determined to educate himself beyond the stereotypes and demeaning depictions of African people in America. He researched the history of Africa himself. As a result, he deemed the plight of African people a righteous and worthy one, and was consciously determined to become involved in Africa in some significant way. Washington readily engaged the emerging Pan-African world, and through his relationship and correspondence with Henry Sylvester Williams, we see he is one of the first to publicly declare Pan-Africanism a movement. If you Google search who promoted the first Pan-African conference in the United States, you'll see that Booker T. Washington pops up. Now, you know, I'm probably one of the first people, well, the first person to put it in a book. However, this is common historical knowledge, right? That he was the promoter of the first Pan-African conference in the United States. Why? Because he had significant control of the Black press. He believed in it, and Henry Sylvester Williams brought it to him, okay? Although he did not attend the actual conference, he promoted it and supported it with his presence and participation in the numerous plenary sessions. Somebody wrote me and said, oh, you spelled plenary wrong. No, plenary is a word, and it's usually the word they use at that time in history. So this is historical document. So that is correct and not a typo, like in my post. Okay, so the conference set the stage for the flowering of the Pan-African movement throughout the African world. Pan-Africanists from the diaspora, Africa, and Europe began a discourse around liberation and the condition of African people in these locales. This setting produced two of the most important Pan-Africanists of the 20th century, W.E.B. Du Bois and eventually Marcus Garvey. Each man had a relationship with Booker T. Washington, and we revisited those relationships as documented through Washington's personal papers. That's earlier in the chapter, right? So if you haven't read the chapter, please do so. W.E.B. Du Bois' relationship with Booker T. Washington was not what it appeared to be. Washington's personal papers revealed that each man had a legitimate issue with the other, but the public discourse around their programmatic differences was not the real conflict. However, the public debate and discourse between the two men impact the social and political and intellectual landscape in America for decades to come. Du Bois and Washington each had their own distinct impact on the African world that had very little to do with the other. So in other words, Washington and Du Bois, they would develop separately and apart, and their development as Pan-Africanists was not dependent or reliant or codependent on the other, right? They would develop as Pan-Africanists, separate and independent of each other, and make very different contributions to the African world, and that's permissible. We are just going back to what I said about white supremacy and culture, what is AKA systemic racism. It doesn't attack us in one way. It attacks us in every way imaginable. Why do we need only soldiers of this kind or only soldiers of that kind? We need people fighting on all fronts with expertise in every area of life to combat that. Okay? When Black presence used to mean something, meaning that you were there to represent and do something for us, that's what it was about. Now, Black presence doesn't mean much. It doesn't mean progress, right? And that's where we get into this course talking about qualifying people's behavior, right? But when it meant something, okay, because at one moment in time it did, to be Black and be in a certain space, mean to represent our interests, and you were going to, if there was evidence of systemic racism, you were going to be on the case. And this is why we need people in every area of life doing many things. We don't need our people to be homogeneous. We need African and Black scientists countering racial bias and racism in the field of science. We need African and Black people in politics countering white racist policy makers, because the policies are only racist as the policy makers. So we can't say there's systemic racism and there's, in that instance, in terms of policy making, there is no individual attached to it. Yes, because there's a case I'm going to share with you how this individual male in the Senate will propose something very dangerous to African and Black people here in the United States, and it would pass. Well, that's an individual policy maker utilizing the area of life that he's in to make racist policies, right? And so we've got to be everywhere. And when we're there, we've got to be clear on the tradition we're in, who we are beholding to, that from which we came, and of course, the little extra stuff, the courage to represent, the courage to engage in struggle and fight on our behalf, on your own behalf, basically. Okay. They would develop as Pan-Africanists, separate and independent of each other, and make very different contributions to the African world. The first Pan-African conference created a buzz, and W.E.B. Du Bois, who declared that the problem of the 20th century would be the color line, emerged as a leader with the creation and establishment of the Pan-African Congresses that followed. Eventually, these congresses set the stage for the discourse around African liberation on the continent. The fifth Pan-African Congress held in Manchester was the most significant. African leadership vowed to push for the complete and total independence of Africa from colonial domination. Du Bois' leadership of the Congresses would be one of his greatest contributions to Pan-Africanism. So his organized efforts after 1900, you guys have 1919 with the establishment of the Congresses. It's initiated by Du Bois and some others. Okay. Very important, because that think tank called the Congresses that Du Bois would initiate would be an organizational body through which African leadership in the future would come to some conclusions in a Pan-African context, meaning all of them were there, African leadership on the continent of Africa, to discuss, to problem solve, to work on this common condition of being oppressed and exploited individually and as nations, right? And this thing that Du Bois created, the Pan-African Congresses, would be the setting, would be that think tank. So, that is his, Du Bois had many contradictions, but that is one, and he has many people in his very long lifetime. He lives almost to be 100. But that would be, in my opinion, his greatest contribution to the African world, through organization, giving a context and a setting for African leadership. And think about it, Du Bois is born in the United States, right? He would create what would be the vehicle for African leadership on the continent of Africa to come to the conclusion and strategize around oppression and exploitation on the continent, and ultimately be the space where they arrive at the conclusion that total independence and liberation of the African continent was a necessity, and that in addition to that, unification of the African continent was also a necessity. We have not achieved that part. We are still on the march. Okay. Marcus Garvey, on the other hand, was inspired both in theory and practice by Booker T. Washington to build an IA and serve African people in the realm of African diasporic history. Garvey was said to find the African population in America with a wishbone and gave them a backbone. This is a fallacy. The philosophical position and literal presence of Marcus Garvey in the US is non-existent without Booker T. Washington. Philosophically, Garvey adopted Washington's views on self-help, race, pride, and independence, which were also the foundational principles of the Tuskegee model. According to Garvey, the UNIA was modeled after Tuskegee and the historical facts reveal Garvey could not have entered the United States without Washington's successful opposition to the African exclusion measure, which was designed to lock out the thousands of Africans from the Caribbean, Central, and South America who had labored on the Panama Canal. Washington, so I'll get into that later. That's a case we're actually going to the African exclusion measure. That's a case we're actually going to cover in this course, and I'll tell you all about it. But that's one of the racist policies that Booker T. Washington fought and won against. Washington's efforts did not stop providing in the wake of his death. Garvey entered, so wait, did I skip something? United States without Washington's successful opposition to the African exclusion measure, which was designed to lock out the thousands of Africans from the Caribbean, Central, and South America who had labored on the Panama Canal. Washington's efforts did not stop providing in the wake of his death. Garvey entered the U.S. in March 1916, specifically to visit Tuskegee 4 months after Booker T. Washington's death, and a little over a year after the racist measure was defeated in January of 1950. So in a multitude of ways, Washington made the emergence of Marcus Garvey and the UNIA in the United States possible. What Marcus Garvey would do is plant his seed of Pan-Africanism in the fertile ground known as Harlem. He was a combination of the 19th century Pan-Africanists that already existed in the US, but his unique contribution was the reassertion of nationhood for African people. So that's just to give you, just sort of conclusion of the chapter, give you the high points and important points that you should take away from that. Well, I think I sort of fully served the issue of Pan-Africanism, right? Unification for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation. Bare bones at the core of any and every definition of Pan-Africanism. And then you can add layers to it, right? One layer with Marcus Garvey, another layer with Booker T. Washington, another layer. Well, Booker T. Washington and Garvey, they're sort of like on the same continuum in terms of their approach, right? Because Garvey, just speaking of that, this image right here is the first international conference on the Negro held at Tuskegee in 1912. This was a conference where Booker T. Washington in particular opened up the 44 industries. Now that's his unique spin on Pan-Africanism, right? He opens up the 44 industries for who? It's going to be obvious if we're talking about Pan-Africanism, for the African world. So Casely, Hayford, all these different people from the African continent involved on the African continent and throughout the diaspora would come to Tuskegee to see the 44 sustainable industries that existed at Tuskegee. Okay. So Washington was seeking to perfect something called the Tuskegee model and export it. And it's interesting because I know some younger budding scholars who are daring to get into this conversation about what Tuskegee was, what the model was, and all of that. The Tuskegee model is a sustainable model for African communities. It's not about colonialism, not at all. Just to be clear, because I've heard like other people who are not immersed or really understand or know the field of knowledge in this realm, and they speculate about what the Tuskegee model was and use a particular case called the Togo and the Togo expedition, and they are incorrect. Okay, but the point is that Washington takes the best practices at Tuskegee and shares it with the African world with the intention that they come there, see what is being done, and take back what is useful to them to promote sustainability. One of the aspects through which we are oppressed is economically, right? We grow, we produce raw goods, Europeans take those things, Westerners take those things, put it in a can, put it in a box in their factories, send it back to us with other stuff in it. And now we pay for it and we consume. So in other words, we consume it to our own detriment. And sometimes these are things that are growing right below our feet, whether it's food or other resources that are useful to the world and to us, right? But they haven't been processed and industrialized, right? So we are being used as extraction sites where we live, where our homelands are extraction sites for other people. So the concept of Tuskegee here is about independence through industry and sustaining oneself, producing everything one consumes, right? So producing what you consume, taking those other folks out of it. And now you can feed yourself, you can house yourself, you can clothe yourself, all these things that are human necessity. The idea was that these things were made at Tuskegee and these industries were perfected. And so they were seeking to share that. Now, this conference, and this is really, this is an actual image of the 1912 International Conference on the Negro. Okay. And this is the conference where 8 educators from the island nation of Jamaica would attend. And part of this conference's resolutions would be to erect a Tuskegee-like institute in Jamaica. Okay. These 8 educators would go back to Jamaica and share all of this with Marcus Garvey. And it is then from there that Marcus Garvey begins to communicate with Booker T. Washington and really hone in on what would be the vision and mission and structure of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. So, for those of you who don't know, yes, the UNIA is built off of the Tuskegee model. And that's not my opinion. This is what Marcus Garvey shares with Booker T. Washington, essentially. Okay. The Tuskegee model aspires, and if you know a little bit of history about Marcus Garvey, as he's moving around the Caribbean prior to establishing the UNIA, he is seeking to raise money for a school. What school? A school that was in this conference resolution, which was a Tuskegee-like institute in Jamaica. Okay, so that is their connection. Here's Du Bois, very young, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, initially a family friend and mentee of Washington. Later, Du Bois became Washington's chief critic. He founded the Niagara Movement and the NAACP, a proponent of Pan-Africanism and direct protest who pushed for social and political rights in the US. You know, so Du Bois would make his great contribution in the form of the Congresses, right? Not the first Pan-African Conference. Interesting point, if you noticed in the chapter, Du Bois is, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like off on a tangent, way beyond time. Okay, I'm stopping. I'm glad I'm last though. Du Bois is the youngest person attending the 1900 First Pan-African Conference. He's the youngest. By 1919, when he organizes and establishes the Congresses, he is the only person alive who was also at the 1900 conference. So in other words, let me say another way. In 1900, there was the great historic First Pan-African Conference. In 1919, when the Congresses begin, which are continuous Congresses, Du Bois is the sole survivor of the first Pan-African Conference. Everyone else is dead. So he would carry the torch into the next century, essentially. Okay? So, you know, and that would be his great contribution. And here's Marcus Garvey. Some of you, if you don't know what he looks like, here he is. Marcus Garvey, the founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, who launched the first mass organization of the African world from his base in Harlem. Okay, so I'm going to stop this share. I'm going to come back on camera real quick. All right. And okay. And hold on one second. Sorry, y'all. Okay. So yes, you see me with my glasses. As I stated, I'm like almost blind without them. So I'm gonna stop there because I'll talk. Let's do like, I really like to do more than 5 minutes, but let's do 5 minutes Q&A about anything we covered here. And what's the point of you knowing all of this? It fortifies you. Now you are not just doing whatever you're doing it with purpose. Okay. I don't know about you all, but for me, my ancestors are a constant source of inspiration, constant source of affirmation for me in the work that I do. And I'm fortified in that, right? So I never wonder why I'm doing whatever I'm doing, right? So in other words, it helps you move with purpose, okay? But, you know, many of you already have that. That's part of what you're, you know, beyond those who might just be curious about I Love Black people, those of you who are living in your purpose, then with regard to our people and the necessity and, you know, the necessity of organizing to protect our lives, then this helps fortify you in that, right? So let me just see what you else, I can't stand this, like this camera, even though I should just be on the computer, but so let me take some of your questions here. And I'm making this big so that I can see. So I can see without my glasses. Okay, yeah, I created, increase the size. All right, good. All right, so. Good, someone said they're enjoying this. Having said we are moving towards being free and safe, I would love that. I know if you have oversight on how far a Black person is from being free and safe. I don't know how far we are from being free and safe. We're working on it though, right? So this means that, so let me, I was about to say, let me give you an inspirational answer to that, but I don't have to give you an inspirational answer to that. I can give you a literal, factual response to that, which is this. So we are old people, right? That was the point of me starting this whole process with you know, the journey of man and genetic odyssey to give you understand of, you know, just an understanding of how old we are as a people, right? And I've typically used the context of 200,000 to 300,000 years that we have existed in terms of the modern human, the African person, but it's really more than that, right? So that's modest. But as an African people, we know for sure 200,000 to 300,000 years, okay? That being said, this thing called racism, it is unfortunate for us, but it hasn't always existed. For most of the time on this earth, that has not been the case. And the culture that produced that has not always existed, right? So this culture that comes out of Europe, this culture of scarcity that says, I have to eliminate you in order to have, there has to be have-nots. That's a particular culture that is expressed by a particular group of people that has infected the world. However, it has only infected and affected the world for the last 400 to 500 years. And we are 200,000 to 300,000 years old, right? If you're having confusion about equating that, think about it in terms of money. Do you want $400 or $500, or do you want $200,000 to $300,000, right? Huge difference. So we've been here a long time. We have this present situation. It's unfortunate for us, but to be quite frank with you, what we're struggling against is this. In terms of this idea of whiteness, that's a non-issue, right? Because Europeans have talked about existing for 7,000 to 8,000 years, which if they can speak in that way, then they know there's a time when they existed and a time when they may not exist in the way that they're defining whiteness. What we are concerned about is this thing right here, the pathology of racism. And so we've won in many ways. For example, of the people that I come from, I'm an African person in America. I come from a people whose bodies were taken into bondage. But we have won that battle. We have taken our bodies back. We engaged war here called the Civil War. We were never supposed to, just so people understand, we were never supposed to get our bodies back. Our bodies were never supposed to belong to us, ever. We won that war. That war wasn't even supposed to be about us. We won that struggle, okay? We won the greatest victory already. What we are fighting is the struggle over the minds. Okay, because even whether there are people who are identifiably white, and they're talking about this, the browning of America, all of this kind of stuff, but you might say the browning of the world, or the re-browning of the world, the re-melanating of the world. You can have brown people who express racist pathology, or the pathology of racism. So we are struggling over the mind, right? And we can win that. We can win that. In the meantime, we can insulate ourselves from those who do carry that out, right? And this is one of the ways, right? Moving in an organized fashion, sharing information in an organized way to protect ourselves from the present and standing racism. But no, I don't. Let me say this. So in my own personal life, I've thought about this kind of stuff too. So when we invaded the Iberian Peninsula, meaning Africans invaded the Iberian Peninsula, known as today Portugal and Spain, we ruled for 800 years. I will give it to you that in spite of what the world says, we're doing pretty good. Okay, 200 years, we already got free. Think about their 800 years, right? Under domination. 200 years, we already got free. We're steadily fighting. It doesn't matter what they do to stop us from fighting. We are still birthing people who are fighting. And now we really just have to produce people who understand that their life and the primacy of our life and freedom is above everything else, and that we will not suffer under the pathology of racism. So I don't give it even 100 years, to be honest with you. I don't. And the more intentional we become about things like this, the more of a reality that will be. I don't give white supremacy in the way that is expressed right now, systemically and otherwise, even another 100 years. Either we will kill it or we will make it so it does not impact us. Do you get what I'm saying? So, yes, exactly. Serena Williams almost died. Yes, exactly. And, you know, could you get more famous? Could you get more wealthy? No. And that goes to tell you the potencies, how potent or the potency of systemic racism. Her title, nothing mattered. Yes. Yes, our continental brothers and sisters learned as a result of Amadou Diallo that, you know, it doesn't matter, you know, that you could have just come from Guinea. This is, you know, it does not care about that. Okay. So what we're doing here with I Love Black People is organizing. I'm moving so slow. Okay, sorry guys. I'm just really not moving effectively with time. Oh, don't worry about Imani, because typos, because guess what? I can't. When I take my glasses off, I've made my font really big, but I can't even really, you know, see things like that. I get the message though. Dr. Sharon, are there independent bodies that would invariably look into issues of system? Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, that's what the African Union calls itself doing. But we're an independent body, right? Sad to say the continents are African. You have to tell me what kind of issues, you know, like how do we, because people, researchers, professional researchers like myself look into things like that all the time. Oh, okay, Elder Iman, like, yeah, no problem with the typing. They're think tanks, you know, you'd have to seek them out. Right? But then independent researchers. I don't know, Chris Emmanuel, what $29.99 meant. Chris, would contact me, please. Okay. Oh, okay. I guess Curtis Murphy and Sister Imani having a conversation. All right, I think. Our activities make us Pan-African even if we don't use the word. Our projects mailing seeds for food products, mailing books. Okay, great. Hi, Linda Fletcher, Dabo. I think I know you. Yeah, I know you. It's in my book, and you have my book, Linda Fletcher. On page 16. I think you have my book. I'm pretty sure you do. And when I did something in Harlem some years ago. Okay, I don't know what this link is that you sent me. Send me an email at globalafricapress@gmail.com and then put in the subject, I love Black people, you know, whatever, right? Okay, and then send me this link, Linda Fletcher. Are you the Linda Fletcher from New York? Because I think you are, but okay. TikTok.com. The speaker, Dr. Paul Allen, talks about how to COVID impact. Right. He is an African descent doctor in Canada. Yeah. So exactly. We were disproportionately susceptible, not because of biological issues, but because of our positioning in society. Absolutely. I mean, it impacts every area of life. Right. But see, this is the thing about America, and this is something that we have to understand. Oh, I'm trying to think how deep I want to go with this. This is something we have to understand. I have to end actually, because I'm like really going way over time. We need to understand that in America in particular, and people seem to focus a lot on America, and I get it, because this is the blue flame. This is one of the most intense points of struggle. Racism is on 10 here. And in spite of it, people don't understand outside of the United States that whatever we do here, we do this in spite of racism, systemic racism. It has to do with organizing ourselves and moving in unison and in blocks. So when you see us doing something here, it's usually because we're fortified in certain ways. But we don't always do that on a large enough scale, right? We might do it in pockets. But something that has happened, we've had many. One of the books that I hope to write, God willing, is about the independent sustainable African communities here in the United States. However, unfortunately, all but Tuskegee, they all end in the same way. Very few are continuous, because at some point or another, usually during this period, post-Reconstruction to the end of the Nadir 1915, they get destroyed by violent white people. I'm just going to be honest. So, you know, which is sort of like a revisiting or a reckoning for those who are listening about, you know, the violence, the waves of violence involved in American culture. You know, people like to try to talk about right now, like, why is America so violent? This is a nation that was built on violence. That's why they're violent. They've never stopped being violent. The problem with us is that now we have assimilated enough that we have become a part of that violence. Okay. And there's a sociological concept that talks about social assimilation leads to suicide. So as we kill our own African cultures, the best values and principles that we had here that sustained us through a hostile environment, society in every way, as we start to kill those aspects of our culture and assimilate into their culture, we become part and parcel and vulnerable to all the same things, right? It's like what Dr. Shashi McIntyre talked about, how to struggle against the beast, whether you see that as a system or whomever. And in this case, I'm using it as in terms of a system, how to struggle against the beast without becoming the beast, right? How do we maintain our humanity and struggle against a system that is definitively anti-human? To the Chris Emmanuel, nobody knows, or I'm going to, so my book is actually been rewritten, and so there's another version of it that I hope to release. I've been saying for years, it's been written 5 years ago, but the point is that in my book, I give you many of the industries, but I don't give you all 44 because they were not all evident to me in my research. So it is still something that can be uncovered by anyone. But I think I will have to dig into the actual Tuskegee archives on site to get an answer. However, I give you many of them. If you have my book, it's in chapter 3, the Tuskegee model in Africa. So if you have my book, Booker T. Washington in Africa, the making of a Pan-Africanist, you will know that in chapter 3, I talk about all the industries and how it worked. So my argument to Dr. Love at 1912 conference. I don't know if J. Robert Love was at the 1912 conference. I'll have to go back to my records and see the attendance list. I know that Casely Hayford was there from Ghana, from the Gold Coast, presently Ghana. I heard about reverse racism. Can you elaborate? I don't know what you mean by reverse racism. Can other people, groups apart from Black, suffer racism? Can Black people be racist? I don't know. I don't know about your first question. I heard about reverse racism. I don't know what reverse racism is, because racism is a system. And as far as I know, there's no group of people of color that have a worldwide system in the way that Westerners, European people who identify as European do, right? And you would have to have power. That system would have to be backed by the power to decide outcomes for various groups of people. So a lot of times when people start to say, so-and-so is racist, people very seldom, so someone can be a racist, but a system is a system. So Black people can have racist thoughts, right? They could believe racist things they can adopt the systemic view, right? That being said, individual Black people and Black people collectively have no system to impact outcomes for any other group of people. They can determine where any other group of people are going to live on a wide scale, how much they're going to make, whether they can get life insurance or not, how they're going to leave, their descendants, what condition they're going to leave them in economically. These things were decided, by other groups of people for us, right? So that's the difference, right? I often say, when people say, oh, a Black person can be racist. No, they can participate in the system. They can be a puppet in the system that already exists, but racism. So in other words, a Black person, and this is what we currently see. We have Black people everywhere, all over. This is what neocolonialism is even about. You have African people, Black people, who are connected to the existing systems of racism, and they are feeding and they are custodians of those systems. Okay? That's how people can participate in racism and still be Black. And what we call that is neocolonialism. It's just the Black face. So you can understand that on the African continent. You have African heads of state leadership, but they're still in bed with European nations using African countries and African people as extraction sites, right? But as far as white people, creating systems, I don't know it. I know some Afrikaners who probably might want to argue that about South Africa, as South Africa tries to work through some things, but nah. I think Black people can have racist ideas. I think Black people can be brainwashed and subscribe to racist pathology, but do they have the chance to impact outcomes for other Black people? Usually not. You know, I would say Clarence Thomas, though, would be a racist, personally. That would be my personal opinion, because he is part of the establishment, and he believes what the establishment has subscribed to with regard to Black people, and he acts on it, right? So there's got to be some action there, right? I hope I answered your question. Where are you able to? No, I have not reached Dr. Africana Kwa. Are you interested in attending? Yes, I'm interested in attending the 8th Pan-African Congress, and she was planning to probably, yes. Email me, please, directly at globalafricapress@gmail.com. Global, GLOBAL AFRICAPRESS@gmail.com. Okay. No, I was not able to reach her just yet. So yes. Iman. Okay. I see the progress now that I have known far we have come. Yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, I'm an African woman in this world. There's a book written by Harriet Jacobs, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. In a world like this, I'm not supposed to be able to get up and decide that I'm going to teach this today. I'm by now 12 noon, I should have labored, probably been raped through the night, laboring for someone else's interests, sleeping on the floor next to some enslaver, being preyed upon by any and everyone in every way, totally unguarded and protected, and maybe even sold if I push back. Those are the lives of our ancestors, you know, in many ways. Those are the ones that, you know, not all our ancestors, right? Our ancestors who were enslaved. And they fought their way out of that, just so you know. There's something I'm going to be writing about all of that, right? Like, there's another way to tell our story, which is a story of great victory. So when I think about that, like, what? My life is cake. Not because it just is, but because I have some ancestors who, when they didn't even have a reason to live, didn't kill themselves, because that's outside of our culture, just survived enough to imagine that there would be people that they would produce that would not live like that. Okay. And they made the ultimate sacrifices, because ultimately, you know, I'm someone who's very in touch with the fact that African people in the United States in particular, we fought a war here. We didn't just get free. That was never part of the plan. Okay. The United States in particular, 250 years of enslavement. We've only been out of enslavement for 160 years this year, 160 years, 1863. So, so the point is that we were enslaved here longer than we were free. It took some direct action on the part of my ancestors to get me free. It took some more direct action on the part of my women African ancestors right here to get someone who is positioned as I am in society free, because I am both an African and a woman. My life should be full of terror and hell had they not made those sacrifices. So every day I'm a living testimony to, like, the diligence of our ancestors, the reality that we can change things, that we can fight, all of that, you know. So yeah, so I'm very connected to that, right? Especially as a historian, I'm always teaching, so I'm always connected to who we were and who we currently are, and sort of where we are in our struggle. I heard about the reverse racism. Okay, so. Oh, yeah, yeah. So I know who she is. Okay. So I've known Linda for a long time. Yes, thank you, Iman. Yes, yes, yes. Well, I'm originally from New York. I'm not going to share my location, but I'm originally from New York, so I know. Okay, but thank you, thank you. Please email me anything you think. Okay, all right, Chris Emmanuel. Yes, chapter 3, a Tuskegee Mile in Africa. Thank you, Marissa. Thank you. I hope I don't like to butcher people's names, so sorry. Okay, thank you, thank you. Excellent point. Clarence Tom is quick. Certainly, yes, exactly. He would be an example of, and his color becomes less of an issue, right? Because he has the power of a system, and he actually actively uses it to impact the outcomes for people in general. But yes, certainly Black people is going to touch us as well. Oh, yeah. Morris Joseph. Oh, yeah. This is something that so hopefully before school starts again, I must write, because I think there's another way to tell our story, and I got a sort of missing link to it. Just this past week, because I was on a panel. Just side note, I'll be on another panel. I guess I'll share it in the group. I'll be on a panel on Dr. John Henrik Clarke tomorrow, talking about the great historian, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, who, although I never met him, I studied his perspective on so much of our history. So which contributes to my whole ideation and my understanding of our story. And certainly the fact that we are such a victorious people, we don't talk about how victorious that we actually are, meaning that we defeated an institution called slavery in one of the most powerful capitalist nations that have ever existed in the history of humanity. We brought that institution to its knees. We destroyed it. That wasn't part of the plan. And we got our bodies. My ancestors come here as chattel property, put in that category. We took our bodies back. And yes, we were functioning. They forced us under the threat of violence to function as commodities, assets. If you have a 250, the United States has not had 250 years post-enslavement. Most of the establishment of the United States where I live has been a slave society, and my ancestors were those slaves. Okay, and those African people who were enslaved, and we killed that system. We brought it to its knees. Okay. And we didn't have a conference about it. We couldn't. But we fought in that war, and we forced our agenda onto the national agenda. One of the great ancestors, Frederick Douglass, is the person who had Lincoln's ear. And although people talk a lot about Frederick Douglass for many other reasons, one of his most significant contributions was the fact that he had the ear of Lincoln. And he did not, if you know about Frederick Douglass post Lincoln's death, he's not praising him, even though he had his ear and had some kind of relationship with him. He's not praising him. He's like, he's still you guys' president. Okay. In light of his death. That being said, it is Frederick Douglass who told Lincoln, you are either a coward or a fool not to let the 500,000 African people, Black people in this country fight for their freedom. But even before that, you have the case of, Robert Small, right? Who steals a ship and goes over to the Union side. You have 500,000 African people who escaped plantation violent plantations when the war here breaks out. So there's so much evidence of how we engaged, and took our freedom and ended this 250-year-old institution. Are you serious? There's not another group of people on the earth like it. And then in that first 50 years, rose to it. I've read the congressional record and the case in my book on the African exclusion measure. There is a debate on the floor of the House around that particular piece of legislation, which we're going to cover in here. But in that debate, now this is not in my book, but in that debate, it's in the upcoming one. There are some white men who start talking about Black people, and they say 250 years of enslavement, 50 years of freedom, and they're already looking us eye to eye. Their story is an epic one. And if it were any other group of people, you would be talking about it as such. Right? But because, America's so invested in having this group of this designated population that they extract from, they're not going to encourage post-enslavement. They lost free everything. Can you imagine? This is where the wealth of America comes from. It's uncalculable wealth. This is why the issue of reparations is so touchy here. You talk about one of the most powerful countries in the world built off the backs of a particular group of people. It's not, hey, like one group or another group, hey, we did this too, and we're gonna give you some money. It's an argument about the wealth of this particular nation. This is why it's different. Let me just say that it's different. It's not just one act, right? So what I'm saying though is that we ended a 250-year-old institution. They didn't see it coming. There's so many ways in which we did that, and then we ripped out of that institution on the other side, not broken, but seemingly whole, ready to resume our lives without support. And we do that in so many ways. This is why you have so many Black, independent, sustainable communities that existed from that point in time up until 1915. And what happened in 1915? 1915, in that window of time, as we are emerging and building these communities, white Americans are responding with serious, deep waves of violence. All right, incapable of competing what we're doing for ourselves, competing with what we're doing for ourselves. They respond most famously as Tulsa, Oklahoma, Greenwood section. But there are many, 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 many. Okay. Let me end here. I'm so sorry. I just totally went overboard today with time. Like we're at 1 hour and change. So I'm gonna stop. Let me apologize. When you say America, are referring to the United States, please clarify. When you say America, are you referring to the United States only? This is a crucial point for reparation. Yeah, when I say America, I'm talking about the United States. However, let me just say this, I'm of the persuasion that believes that every group of African people needs to challenge each and every colonial stronghold and imperialist nation. The French don't need to get away with anything. The British don't need to get away with anything. And I think whoever has the successful model, we take it on the road. Right? So I think the Africans who were enslaved by the French, hit them up, level that march towards reparation. But when I talk about specifically reparations in the United States, yes, I'm talking about America, the United States of America. And when we talk about reparations here, it's over the wealth of this particular nation. right? One of the wealthiest nations in the world, not without our contribution in that way, our very bodies. It ate us, right? We were the human fuel of this place called America. Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. For sure. But who are we declaring special status to? The UN? You know, like, I don't know. Yeah, who that would be. Oh, sure. I think we always deserve exemptions. I'm mad every time I pay taxes. I feel like my ancestors did all they need to do for this country for free. Let me keep the fruits of my labor on a daily basis. I'll take part of my reparations in the form of tax exemption. I don't want to contribute in that way. Yeah, but anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. Oh yeah. I agree with all that, right? Imani. Is it Iman or Imani? Okay. Yes, I agree with you on those points. So let me end. It's like literally 12:59. Okay, Iman. Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you all for giving your time, energy. Yes, exactly. Santi Sana, General Tub, absolutely, General Tub. Okay. Thank you all for giving your time, loving African people through action and being a part of I Love Black People. I am because we are, and I'll be posting the new readings on Monday. Okay. Sorry, Yvonne. I don't know. I went overtime today. This is not the norm, just so you guys know. I'm going to stick to the 30 minutes here on out. Okay. And I'll be coming with those revisions. All right.
Okay, no problem.
All right. Thank you. Sorry.
Yes, thank you very
I
much.
am because we are.
Yes, I am because we are.